In 1928, a fire started at an ammunition storage depot in Hawthorne, Nevada. The site held thousands of rounds of stored explosives. The fire could be seen from miles away. Then the explosions began. Hawthorne, Nevada, was used as a storage site for military munitions. By the late 1920s, large quantities of ammunition were held there, organized, cataloged, and stored across designated areas of the depot. The purpose was not immediate use, it was containment. A place to keep material that needed to be held, managed, and at times prepared for disposal. The site was structured. Explosives were separated into sections. Storage followed procedures intended to reduce risk. Movement within the depot was controlled. Under normal conditions, the materials remained stable. The danger was understood, but it was also contained. What made the site safe was not the absence of risk, but the expectation that the risk would remain controlled. That expectation depended on one condition: that nothing would reach what was stored there. On the day of the incident in 1928, a fire was reported within the ammunition depot. The exact origin was not immediately clear. What is consistent in the record is that the fire began in an area where materials were already stored. At first, it did not present as an immediate large-scale threat. Fires were not unknown in industrial or storage environments. They were expected to be contained. Personnel on site responded. Efforts were made to control the spread. But the conditions were not neutral. The materials stored within the depot were not passive. They were stable under normal conditions. But heat changed that. As the fire continued, it began to reach areas where ammunition was stored. The distance between sections, intended to reduce risk, became less effective as the fire moved. Once the fire reached stored materials, the situation changed. Not suddenly, but in a way that could no longer be controlled through ordinary response. The first explosions did not end the event. They marked the beginning of it. As the fire spread through the depot, it reached additional storage areas. Each contained materials that reacted under heat. Explosions followed in sequence, not as a single detonation, but as a continuation. One section ignited, then another. The pattern repeated. The force of each explosion affected the surrounding area. Structures were damaged. Debris was thrown outward. The fire did not stop. It moved through what remained. Observers at a distance could see the progression: smoke rising, followed by intermittent flashes, then more. The scale became visible not through a single moment, but through repetition. Explosions continued as long as the fire had access to stored materials. The event did not resolve quickly. It extended over time, and while it continued, control of the site was no longer possible. The explosions at Hawthorne did not resolve into a single, clearly defined cause. Investigations followed. Reports were written. But like many large-scale industrial incidents, the origin of the fire was not established with complete certainty. There were indications, possibilities related to handling, storage conditions, or the presence of materials that could ignite under specific circumstances, but no single explanation accounted for every part of what occurred. What is known is the result. The depot contained large quantities of ammunition. Once the fire reached those materials, the reaction could not be reversed. The systems in place were designed to prevent that point from being reached, not to stop it once it had begun. There were people present at the site when the fire started, personnel working within the depot, others in the surrounding area. When the situation escalated, evacuation became the only response. Time was limited. The progression from fire to explosion did not leave room for extended control. Some were able to move away from the immediate danger. Others were closer to where the fire had already spread. The full number of injuries and fatalities is not consistently recorded across all accounts. What is clear is that the event caused loss of life. It also caused widespread damage to the depot itself and the surrounding area. Structures were destroyed. Stored materials were consumed. The site, which had been organized to contain risk, became the source of it. In the aftermath, the focus shifted to what could be changed, how materials were stored, how distance between sections was measured, how fires could be detected and responded to earlier. But those adjustments came after. They did not change what had already occurred. The expectation had been that risk could be managed through structure, through separation, through control of movement and access. And for a time, that expectation held. The depot functioned as intended until a single condition failed. A fire reached what had been stored. And from that point forward, the system did not have a way to recover. What remains is not an unexplained event. It is a sequence that follows its own logic once it begins. A fire starts, it reaches stored materials, the reaction continues, and the structure that was meant to contain it becomes part of how it spreads. That was tonight's story. You've been listening to The Midnight Box. Wherever you are, thank you for listening. Good night.